If you're looking for a home mortgage, look no further than Premise Mortgage. The Premise process is simpler, faster, and more convenient than the competition because of their cutting-edge technology. Plus, Premise is an independent company, yet is backed by a bank. Therefore, they can offer all kinds of products for clients with various needs and deliver an awesome customer experience. Premise Mortgage is licensed in 43 states and counting. Contact Richie Love today at 704-607-1497. That's 704-607-1497.
Matt Doherty, the 6'7" sophomore from East Meadow, New York.
Leadership is learned.
A starter on Coach Dean Smith's legendary 1982 Tar Heels National Championship team with Michael Jordan.
Jordan comes down with a rebound. Clears it away to Doherty. Doherty going in against Floyd for the layup. It's good.
Leadership is earned.
Head coach at the University of North Carolina and the University of Notre Dame.
You notice Matt Doherty, he is up working every second of this ball game.
Leadership is taught.
Public speaker, author, and executive coach.
And leadership does not require a title.
This is the Rebound Podcast with Coach Matt Doherty.
Hey guys, thanks again for tuning in to the Rebound Podcast with me, your host, Matt Doherty. My guest today is Tim Pernetti, President of IMG Academy. But from 2009 to 2013, Tim was the athletic director at Rutgers when he helped shepherd the Scarlet Knights into the Big Ten. I can't wait for you to hear this conversation with Tim. He goes into depth about his time at Rutgers, from switching conferences to being let go from the position. He also discusses some of his own personal philosophies, including trusting your gut and keeping your foot on the gas. It's been a wild ride in his world of sports leadership. It's been a wild ride in the world of sports leadership for Tim, and I'm grateful to have him on the podcast to share his experiences. Hey, Tim, thanks for coming on the show.
Good to be on with you.
Yeah, tell the audience what it was like for you growing up. Northern New Jersey guy, what was it like? Family, sports, that kind of thing.
Well, I think people here in New Jersey, right, and the jokes start flying relatively quickly. But what I can tell you, I always say the same thing. If you're not from New Jersey, you don't understand. It was great. You know, I was born and raised in Northern New Jersey in Bergen County. Still have a home in Bergen County. And it was sort of what you would expect. You know, I had a big, on my father's side, especially big Italian family. Holidays were sort of the thing. And you could picture fitting 40 people at a dining room table for 12 and people just eating for 12 to 15 hours a day. But, you know, great memories. I grew up in a great place. You know, my parents took great care of us. We lost my dad when I was young, before I went to high school, but high school was a really good experience for me. And naturally I was into sports. I got to play at a great high school program in North Jersey called Ramapo High School. Mm-hmm. And, you know, made a lot of friends and really found a groove athletically there that really was a springboard into my opportunity to play college football. But, you know, growing up in New Jersey is what you'd expect, right? It's like I said, we had the Italian thing going, and in the summer you used to go, they say down the shore. Like, people don't say go to the beach or go to the ocean. They say go down the shore in New Jersey. And it's a place where I still have a lot of family that's, you know, near and dear. And I think it's a place where I'll always be in some form or fashion.
What was, I think about your dad, you know, as you answered the question, and you know, two things came to mind: 40 people eating at a table of 12 for 12. That's probably where you learn some of your toughness, right? Elbowing, like, and your football, you learn how to be aggressive at the dinner table. What impact did your dad passing away before you started high school? That had to be tough.
Yeah, it was hard. I've never had an opportunity to talk about, you know, growing up, and it's not a thought that immediately doesn't trigger in my mind, because it was such a significant event for all of us. So I think, like everybody else, like your childhood, like if you have an intact family and great parents, and you grow up in that environment, you don't expect anything bad to happen, especially I think to your dad. And most kids, I think, look at their dad as relatively an untouchable human being and individual. And, my dad was sort of like a kid from the streets of Hoboken. He paid his way through college. He became a pharmacist, and he had a very successful business. He had 2 pharmacies in North Jersey. I was growing up when I was 8, 9, 10 years old. I used to go to work with him on Saturdays, and he'd sit me behind the counter. That was when the counters, the pharmacies were like raised up. Right. He'd sit me at the counter and say, hey, see this bottle, count out 10 of these or count out 12 of these, which was probably highly illegal at the time. I mean, who knew that? Right? You have a 9-year-old doing this.
Especially if they were one short all of a sudden. Dad is
he used to say we never had any complaints, so we must have got it right. But what he really instilled in me was like those Saturdays, the drives in the car, spending time at the pharmacy, the drives home, were some of the moments in my life that I still actually remember the most. And what I remember he instilled in me then was the value of relationships, because he had a lot of customers that were older. They trusted the pharmacist. And when they would come in, I remember he would walk down and stand on the same level, and he would talk to them face to face. I remember him leaving Thanksgiving dinner once to go to the pharmacy to mix eye drops for one of his customers that needed it and driving it to the house. Mm-hmm. So he really helped me understand the value of relationships and how important it is, to be in relationships and be invested, and not only invested when you need something. So, when I was 11,
repeat that. Yeah. That was subtle, but very impactful.
Yeah. So I think, relationships, especially in the business that I've been lucky enough to be in my whole career, they're the foundation, of everything I've ever done. And what I learned from my dad was you invest in relationships, and you don't only invest in them or reach out to them when you need something. Like you check in, you call for no reason, you make yourself available. And he used to talk about being accessible. He would say, being a great pharmacist is about being accessible. Wow. People want to know when they pick up the phone that you're going to be there for them.
Wow. I love that. When I start interviews, I don't know where it's going to go, right? I have some basic questions, but I always like to ask about the influence of growing up. And you then told us about your dad and, that lesson and the lessons, the many lessons, and how you now are still applying them. That's powerful. How, with his passing at such an early age in your life, how has that impacted the way you parent?
It was hard, because I have 2 brothers. I'm the middle of 3 boys. My older brother and I at the time were not as close as we are now, or we're, inseparable. My younger brother was 8 years old. And, I was sort of the type A in the house with personality. And I was always, either entertaining or maybe people laugh or whatever. But I saw it. It was challenging, and it was hard to see that unfold in front of your eyes, to see someone so strong, really brought down to nothing at the end. But it makes you grow up really, really fast, and my mother was in her late 30s when it happened. Like, it was challenging, but I sort of tried to step into the void and be there, for everybody as much as I could. As it relates to parenting my own kids, I've had a fun career in sports and entertainment that has taken me on plane trips and away from home more than I probably would do if I did it all over again. Mm-hmm. I think I traveled the most in my career when my middle son, Max, was in high school playing basketball, and I missed 1 game in 3 years. And when my older son, Connor, was playing football his senior year, I didn't miss a game. And when my daughter, Natalie, played lacrosse last year, I think I missed 1 game. And even right now, like, I'm at my house in New Jersey. I'll be back to IMG in Florida tomorrow after I go out to Pennsylvania tonight to watch my son play. So, awesome. I think the answer is it's sacrifice, right? You have to, when you're younger in your career, you're like afraid to take a day off, afraid to take vacation, like all of that stuff. And now it's just like, you just have to make conscious decisions, as nauseous as they may make you, because like, what's really more important.
Yeah. On your deathbed, I say this, I don't think your athletic director will be there. I don't think the president of a school, but you want your wife and kids by your side saying good things and meaning it.
Yeah. And listen, that's all you can ever really hope for. And by the way, like, I'm not a fool either. Like, I've had this conversation with my kids and I've had it with my wife. Like, I am no picnic. I know that I am not the best at times. I know sometimes I will get all consumed by the work and by a variety of other things and get pissed off at sort of like things that really don't matter. Like, nobody's perfect, right? But they've stuck with me, and it's a great like this is my group.
What's the thing that you'd get pissed off at that really don't matter, like a trigger?
Sometimes it really has to do with, it always has to do with work. And I think that over a period of time, I got to be in leadership at a young age. Like when I took the job at Rutgers, I was 38. I was the youngest Division I athletic director in the country for a couple of years. And I really had to learn the hard way about leadership. But over time, what I've been able to do is try to make sure that people are very, very clear about what expectations are and very, very clear about what you're trying to do together. And then you cut them loose to go do their job. I think where I get triggered sometimes is when things happen that are self-inflicted. Mm-hmm. Like you can't prevent things from breaking. Things are going to go wrong. Like it's just a reality, especially in a thing like I'm doing now, which we'll talk about, is like you got 1,500 kids and you got kids at camp and you got 1,200 staff. It's a facility. Like things are going to go wrong. You just have to roll with it. When it's self-inflicted, that really just gets me fired up, because the things that you knowingly can manage and avoid are the things that you should get right 100% of the time.
Mm-hmm. What does fired up look like for you? Maybe what does fired up look like for you now versus when you were 38-year-old AD at Rutgers?
When I was 38 and had that job, same deal, like almost similar in that you have big scale suddenly, and things would go wrong all the time. And I was dealing with politics and all these other things, but I didn't accept that things could go wrong then. To me, it was like everything absolutely positively has to go right, which was a fool's paradise. And I think I learned the hard way, through a variety of experiences that I had there, Matt, some of which you and I have talked about, in our relationship. But what fired up looks like now is I'll get fired up but I'll deal with it, sort of the fired up moment on my own. Mm-hmm. And then I will bring people to the table. And, one of the things that I've tried to build into my leadership style is it's not personal. Like I say, it's not personal 10 times a day. Mm-hmm. It's not personal. Let's get to the table. Let's tear down the walls. Let's have the conversation. Let's disagree, but let's figure out when we walk out of the room how we know we can prevent from what had happened from happening again. Mm-hmm. So like, I don't go into room, don't picture me walking into a conference room with a bat on my shoulder. Like that's not what it looks like, but I deal with it in my own. And then we get with people and we say, okay, we know what went wrong. Let's not spend 1 second talking about who's to blame. Let's figure out how we're going to solve it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I had some visions of The Godfather when you're talking about bat over my shoulder. Yeah.
You see, New Jersey, you're stereotyping. It's like, this is what happens.
I'm trying not Sopranos, but anyway, yeah. So wow, it's one of the biggest things we talk about on this podcast is it's the Rebound podcast. So rebounding from setbacks, rebounding from adversity. And you went through a very difficult time, kind of like I went through. You went back to your alma mater. You tried to kind of save the day and lead the program, and you were doing great things. And all of a sudden you got maybe an axe in the back. Tell us about that moment. Tell us about those moments, or tell us about that time of being at Rutgers. And really, I mean, the trajectory was immense. All of a sudden you saw the red R up and down the East Coast. It meant something. Mm-hmm. And then things went south. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, well, listen, anybody that's ever worked at a high level in collegiate athletics, I think, could tell some version of that story, right? Like you have your version, I have my version. I have so many great friends and relationships throughout the college space that have their version, mm-hmm. Depending on where they've been. When I took that job, it was interesting. We had just done, it's where you and I met. We had just done the CSTV, college sports cable network startup, and sold it. And it just kind of came out of the clear blue at me. And I knew enough about athletic directors from negotiating media rights contracts with them and having relationships to know that it wasn't really a job that I was interested in doing. But it was Rutgers. Mm-hmm. Went to school there, played football there, met my wife there. I really had a great experience there, period. So I think that's what drew me to it was my heartstrings pulled me to it. Once I got into the room, I knew I could do it. because I knew what their roadmap was going to look like. There was going to be a fork at some point, and if they didn't have the right tires on the car, the right gas in the car, the right, washer fluid in the windshield, they were going to take the wrong road. So, and that road was conference expansion, because every 4 to 7 years, as media contracts were coming up, things were changing. Coming out of the media space, I knew that I had the relationships and a strategy to get them out of the league that they were in, which, by the way, with the Big East was a great conference that served that place really, really well for a lot of reasons. But as far as the business was going in the future, I knew it wasn't going to be sustainable. So what I would say is the only thing I probably underestimated going in, there were a few things, but the biggest thing was the politics.
Yeah.
Politics on the campus, the politics with constituents, the politics with the politicians in New Jersey. There were a lot of people that had their hand in it. But, I was 10 years have gone by since we got Rutgers in the Big Ten. And Jim Delaney, the former commissioner, and I actually agreed to do an interview with the Star Ledger in New Jersey and talk about it. It was really fun to relive it. But what I'll tell you that I learned was that I was completely obsessed with the strategy, the plan, getting the whole thing done. And in the process, it, put a lot of strain on my life and my personal life. And it was a challenging time, but I really had a goal in mind of getting it accomplished. And when I did, I would say there were high highs and low lows. And that was the high of the whole thing.
Tim, Rutgers, we this is the Rebound podcast. So we talk about dealing with adversity and setbacks, and you dealt with tremendous adversity. You started off great at Rutgers, 38 years old, great trajectory, and it was great until it wasn't. Tell us about that time.
Well, it's great till it wasn't. Oh, the story of every administrator or coach, I think, that worked in college, everybody has a story. For me, I knew enough about athletic director jobs, Matt, from working on the media side of the business to know that I didn't want one. And then it was Rutgers. I think had it been any other school, I probably would not have pursued it. But, a place where I went to school, played football, had the opportunity to earn a scholarship, which at the time I needed to go to college, met my wife there. I got so much out of the experience. So I think my emotions drew me to it. But once I was in the room and interviewed, I knew that I could help them. And I knew there was a path they were on and a fork in the road that was coming, that if they didn't have the proper things in place, they might end up going down the wrong road. And having come out of the media side and seeing how the media business was driving conference expansion and all these things, just felt like it was a moment in time. And I really had my eyes open. I knew what I was getting myself into, except I might have underestimated the politics, whether it was the politics on campus with various constituents, the politicians in New Jersey, in the state that had their hand in it on a pretty regular basis. But what I would say is there were high highs and there were low lows. But to me, I felt like we got off to a great start. It was all about brand. To me, I knew the Big Ten was the destination, and the goal was to make sure we were telling our story publicly and, if best part, nationally every single day. That comment about the red R, we used to have interns out in the parking lots during football games, putting one of those magnets on every single car in the parking lots. And I would feed information to writers about, Syracuse is calling themselves New York College Team. Here's the top 10 rated college football games in the New York media market in the last 3 years. And as you can see, they played in none and we played in all of them. So it was you had to storytell and create a narrative. And I played a little New Jersey at people. When people would stake their claim, I would say, well, we're going to hit back. And in a lot of ways, I think that scrappy, gritty approach inspired people. I really do, because how did it change the business? We suddenly had a commercial business we were able to build with naming rights and sponsors and investment. We raised $100 million there in 4 years. They'd never seen investment like that over a period of time. So it was a transformational time. And when we were able to get the deal done, Jim Delaney and I, he was the former commissioner, just talked about this. We actually did an interview 10 years later with the Star Ledger, reliving it. It was so fun to relive it, because if people only knew what went on, the number of times I had to use a donor's plane to kind of sneak around to have a meeting, or we're meeting at midnight at the Ritz-Carlton in Washington, D.C. to hammer out the final details 2 weeks before the announcement. It's right out of the movies. And what I always tell people is I stood up in front of the whole world and announced this thing. that I knew was the one thing that would change the place, not just athletics, change the place forever. And 3 months later, I got fired. So it at times it really can bring your feet back to the ground and bring you back down to earth quickly, the business, because it changes dramatically. Like, I hope that my tenure there is, and I think it is, will be judged on the body of work, not just hiring a basketball coach that ended up losing his mind and cost me my job.
All right. So things go badly with your coach, your basketball coach, Mike Rice. And how did you respond to that? Because a lot of people listening, will, if they haven't already, face crisis, right? And so that was kind of a crisis. Tell us how you tried to manage that, and maybe where you would have managed it differently looking back on it now, or maybe you wouldn't have.
Yeah, no, listen, I think there's one part of it I think I might have redone, and I'll explain it. And, again, you do the timeline is 4 years of just mind space and thought leadership and like literally obsession with getting in the Big Ten. And then November of 2020 or November of 2012, like, I walk in this room. I mean, I never saw more cameras in my life. And we announced this thing, and it was like the pinnacle, I think, professionally for me. And also to be able to do something that I knew was going to impact the place, not just the athletics department, a place forever. And then 3 months later, I'm dealing with this. But in between, what happened was 5 days after the Big Ten announcement, I was asked to come to a meeting with a former employee and his lawyer in men's basketball to discuss a personnel matter. At which point I was able to view what I would call the lowlights, the famous tape that was spread all over ESPN and YouTube and a variety of other places. And what I knew at that moment from watching 30 seconds of that tape was that I was firing the coach immediately after that meeting. I knew that. I had already made up my mind. I didn't need any counsel. I wasn't going to talk to anybody. Like, I had my deputy AD and my CFO sitting next to me, and they looked at me and they knew me well enough to know what I was going to do. So we left that meeting and went downstairs to a different room in the building. And they said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "You know what I'm going to do." And I left that meeting and I got in my car and I started to drive to where I knew the coach was to handle it. When the general counsel's office at the university and the president's office had reached out to remind me, because one of the attorneys was in the room, our attorneys, that there was a process and there's a policy for things like this, and outside investigations need to take place. So you know what my mistake was? Taking my foot off the gas and putting it on the brake.
Literally.
Seriously, like, I'm telling this almost like I'm writing you a book, but literally that's what it is, because had I not stopped and just done what I knew we needed to do and dealt with the backlash, like, would have been the backlash. I didn't follow the policy. Fine. Let me roll 30 seconds of this for the national media, and then you tell me if I did the right thing or not. Right. I knew it was the right thing to do. So, but I think because of my affiliation in my life with the place, I always wanted to do things by the book, right? Because I didn't want to be that guy that came in and did things differently. So that was my biggest mistake. And the minute the process unfolded and outside counsel comes in, and then I get this report that took a week to produce that basically said, yeah, you probably could fire the coach based on this, but you really can't based on this. And I was just like, did we actually pay for this? Like, I thought we were going to get a definitive opinion. But my advice all along was there was no other option than to terminate the coach. And what I did was I relied on my media background, Matt, and said, when this tape goes public, this university will not survive it. And I don't think anybody in this room is prepared to stand up when it does and say the decision we made was the right decision. So we suspend the coach. It's actually on record at a public board meeting where I'm being congratulated for how I handled it, and I'm going on the record saying it's the wrong decision. Like, it was chaos. And then Final Four weekend, a couple months later, the tape broke, and 5 days later I was out. Like, that's how fast it accelerated. As you know, fans and constituents and just the media, like, no one loves a scandal as much as the ones that are in and around college sports.
Wow. So you're trying to, you're following policy. You're getting advice from your bosses, whether it be the president or the board of directors or board of trustees. And then they need a scapegoat, right? And it's Tim Pernetti. Did you feel betrayed? Did you feel like nobody had your back or people were stabbing you in the back? How did that feel?
I felt a lot of things. And, and I think the first time I really reflected on it in great depth was when I was able to retell the story about how the Big Ten came together. Because that was obviously part of the story that happened in the aftermath. But I felt a lot of things. I felt confused, first and foremost, because I had been trotted around campus by the donors and the board and the president and the general counsel and a lot of other people as like the future of the university, because what I had been able to secure for the university, like we were 5 seconds away from being one of those schools that ended up in a lesser non-group of our group of 5 conference. Like, so I was celebrated on the campus and I felt like I had a lot of credibility to get things done. And so I was confused, number one. Number two was, the president at the time, he was a new president. I don't think he was ever ready for the bright lights of athletics. And when this happened, shortly after we announced the Big Ten, I brought that tape to him in the aftermath to show it to him, and he just wanted the lawyers to deal with it. And as I look back on it now, like maybe he was smart enough to have plausible deniability, or maybe he didn't have a strategy. I have no idea. But what disappointed me the most was that I did feel like I was part of something bigger, and I didn't feel like people had my back. The donors that would call me at 5:00 on Friday night because they wanted 10 sideline passes for the game Saturday for their family, or wanted to fly on the charter. And I bent over backwards for people and really created community there. Not only did they not only were they not there when I picked up the phone, but they were actually working behind the scenes to move me on. And that was disappointing. It was very, very disappointing.
Disappointing. I was in a Booster's, 2 of his 3 weddings. I was at two of his 3 weddings. I would get him on the plane. I would get him great seats to the ACC tournament. I lost my job. I've not talked to him since. He never reached out.
Yeah, once. It's amazing. Really, it's amazing. And now, Matt, I want to say too, like there was a group that got behind me. Like I tell this all the time. Like there was a group of people that I had convinced to put a significant amount of money in play to support the program and build facilities that took their money and went home for years, which I never felt like was the right thing to do. Like I appreciated the loyalty, but I used to remind them, like, you're not hurting the school. You're really just hurting kids. And, even like famous people, like one of my best relationships was with a guy named Steve Plofker, and his wife is Bobby Brown from Bobby Brown Makeup. They went in the New York Times and talked about it. Like I did have support, but the people that were in the room making the decision were thinking about their own survival and not necessarily thinking about the big picture.
You touch on by the book. You said, you literally hit the brake and turned around as opposed to going to fire Mike Rice.
Yeah.
By the book. And maybe that's growing up. You grow up in Northern New Jersey. I grew up Irish Catholic, and you followed rules, you followed processes, you did what you were told, you did the right thing. And sometimes you, instead of asking for permission, you ask for forgiveness, and the results are better. Right. And that's that trusting your gut instinct, but also years of, as a kid, I got to do the right thing. I cheated on a test. I got to tell my mom, dealing with that guilt of going against authority. And if you did keep your foot on the gas, you might still be there. And so how do you, the couple of defining moments, talk about the press being at the end of your driveway, like the day after. Tell this is an awesome story. I love this story. Talk about this story.
Yeah, listen, it wasn't just a day. They spent a week out there trying to get a glimpse, and it was like you finally get an idea of what it may be like is to be a real celebrity personality where people are just hanging out trying to get a picture or trying to get you to say something. After 4 or 5 days just in the trenches, and I spent most of it in my attorney's office in Morristown, New Jersey, who I didn't know at the time ended up becoming one of my great friends to this day. I had to drive home. And when it was over and I signed the separation agreement, I walked to my car. I hadn't slept in days. I drove back to my house in Bergen County. I was angry. I was upset. I cried, a variety of things. And I had to park in a nearing neighborhood and sneak through the back of someone's yard to get through the back door of my house, because the front of my house and just one road in, one road out just had a media circus, TV trucks, police, there were reporters everywhere. So when I got home, I looked like crap. I felt terrible. I took a shower and I shaved and I put a button up on and I put a jacket on. And I remember, my wife saying, what are you doing? And I said, if I don't go out there and say something, they're never going to leave. Right. So I have to go do something, and I'd rather just do it, get it over with. So I went out the back door of my house, walked around the yard, and got down the stairs to the driveway. And there was this 50 yards between me and the press. And when they saw me come down the stairs, like rats, they all went to one spot at the end of the driveway. Cameras were up, mics were out. And I've told you this story, that 50-yard walk, the number of things that went through my mind that I could say, the number of people that I could call out, the things that I was displeased with that happened in the last 4 or 5 days, everything, like the New Jersey, you want to talk about that Italian kid from North Jersey? I was raised on Hard Knocks with my dad. That all came back in a moment. And I'm not going to lie. I've told people this all the time. Did I think about burning people when I got to the end of the driveway? You bet your ass I did. I thought about it. But when I got to the end, a few steps away, I thought to myself, this is the one opportunity that everybody that is following this in the world is going to have to see how I react. And I'm going to do what my dad taught me to do when I was a kid, which is I'm going to illustrate my character at this moment. Because it would have been, I always say, when you want to cut people that are going down with you, or people that are excusing themselves from responsibility, that feels good for about 30 seconds. But the long-term effect of it is bad on you, right? I'm thinking, all right, there's a CEO watching this right now. I go off the reservation. He's going to say, wow, I was kind of feeling bad for this guy. I was thinking about calling him I'm going to hire this guy. He's going to go on TV talking about me. Forget it. So when I got to the end of that 50-yard walk, I just looked the cameras in the eye and I was honest. I said, it's a sad day. I said, for a lot of people, including me and my family, I always tried to do what was best. And I always will wish that university the best. And I turned around and I walked away, and I never spoke to the media about it again. And as much as I wanted to say some other things about other people, instinct wins the day.
Instinct,
gut wins the day.
Wins the day. And, the instinct of you in your car when you hit the brakes and turned around with Mike Rice, and now your instincts here and you trusted him, and now you didn't have to answer to anybody at that moment because you were free in a weird way. You had to answer to your wife and kids, but ultimately to yourself on that 50-yard walk. And we already discussed this. I've got the naming rights to your book, The 50-Yard Walk.
You do? Yeah, I got the one to the ATM. I got $20 for you if you want to trade it. So I think that's about all it's worth right now. So.
When I got let go at North Carolina, very similar situation. And Kevin White, who at the time was the athletic director at Duke, ironically, but he was at Notre Dame. No, I think he was still at Notre Dame. And he called me, and I left Notre Dame. I left Kevin White to go to North Carolina. He's one of the first people to call me, and he said, Matt, take the high road. There's less traffic up there. And
it's a great
line. You did it. And as a result of you taking the high road, tell us what happened. Because at that point, the fear of what's next? Will I ever get a job again? You think the worst. So you're thinking some bad thoughts, right? Tell us about what you're thinking and then what happened in the next, 8 to 24 hours.
Everything you said is accurate, and instinct winning the day was right at that time. And my instinct when I was driving that car was to keep driving. Right. So instinct wins the day no matter what. And I think, my dad used to say this, like, your gut never will fail you. Even when it doesn't feel right, it won't fail you. But I really felt, you want to talk about feeling unhireable and feeling like all you had poured into your career is at the end. That's the way I felt. I felt that way driving home. I felt that way after I talked to the press. You turned the TV on and I kept seeing my stupid face on the television, like in a still shot on the upper left while they rolled this tape with this coach. Like, I couldn't get away from it. But what happened that night was, I won't get into specifics, but I did get a call from a university president of a Power 5 school in the ACC that wanted to meet with me about the athletic director job that night. And I remember saying to him that I was flattered, but I really didn't think I was in the right state of mind to even consider anything right now, but I would be happy to discuss it down the road. But when I hung up that phone, I thought to myself, maybe it's not over. Maybe what I did today at the end of my driveway resonated. And in the next 36 hours, I naturally got a lot of phone calls from friends and people that supported me in the industry and colleagues, like all the people that you and I know. But I got some calls about job opportunities that I never even thought would present themselves in a lifetime for me. And then it started to become clear. The sun started to come up, that when you handle yourself a certain way in a certain moment, when everybody's expecting you to go one way and you take that high road, it says something about who you are. A couple of these job opportunities weren't stuff like that I wasn't even qualified to do, but I think it was more about we're looking for real leadership that's not going to create chaos in situations of adversity. But a couple of days later, Matt, it became clear to me, it was hard for a long time, but it became clear to me that it was not over, that this was just a chapter in the book. Not every chapter is a rosy chapter, but there were going to be new ones.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the next chapter. Let's talk about IMG and the success that you have had there and the success that is IMG. You're talking about powerful brands. I mean, that's an international brand and you're at the core of it. Talk about how you got involved with IMG and what your role is and where IMG is right now and what's the future of IMG.
Sure. So my tenure at IMG is 8 years now, and it's been terrific on so many fronts because IMG, which was owned by Endeavor, a big Hollywood, entertainment and content company, there's nothing that the industry does that doesn't operate inside the four walls of this company. Like there's so many tentacles to the business. So when I realized there were going to be new opportunities, the first flyer I took was to launch an MLS team in New York City called New York City FC. And again, never played the sport, but built the business side out, had great partners, was a year and a half into it when IMG came calling about their ownership. Endeavor had just purchased IMG and they had a college business. And this business was outsourcing all of the commercial rights at colleges and universities, sponsorship, marketing, licensing, stadium seating, naming rights, like basically putting groups on the campus to generate revenue. And it was an important business they acquired. They were looking for someone to run it and someone that spoke the language of athletic directors and presidents and understood the commercial side. I mean, it couldn't have been a better fit for me. And, I'll always be grateful to R.A. Manuel and Patrick Weitzel and Jason Lublin and Mark Shapiro, the leadership of that company, for bringing me in because the Rutgers stuff was still fresh in college. To bring somebody like that in, I thought, for these guys, what I used to say was, I like these guys. Like they got guts. They're not going to, be conservative based on something that happened in the past. So I was able to run that business on their behalf and run it in different ways and build it. And we were able to sell it to a competing company, to Learfield, which now owns the business. And in the transition, I was able to move into a totally different leadership role at Endeavor, overseeing what we called Endeavor properties, like events, sports properties, other things in North America. When COVID hit, one of my properties I was overseeing was the IMG Academy. And the plan during COVID was, hey, is there a way we can keep this thing open? So I went down there and took it on and realized we had to keep it open because we had international kids that were stranded and couldn't get home. But, the academy, if people that don't know, it's It's a suite of connected products and performance led by the IMG Academy in Florida with 1,500 kids in the boarding school, 10,000 kids going to camp there in the summers and throughout the year. Pro training, performance training, like it's an intentional personal development environment. So when I went down there and figured out a way to keep it open, the first big deal I was able to be part of was I landed the WNBA during COVID to do their bubble season in Florida. And it created so much great visibility for our brand, especially given all the things that were going on in the world in social injustice. Like it was a real moment in time for women's sports that we were really lucky to be part of. But we were open for business. And since then, because we were able to stay functioning throughout COVID, we have accelerated our business over the past 3 years more than we expected. It was 1,000 students before COVID. It's 1,500. 4,000 kids going to camp. Now it's close to 10,000. And in the process, we launched new products, including IMG Plus, which is Matt Doherty lives in Dubai. He's a young basketball player. He signs up and does virtual training in mindset, confidence, and mental conditioning. We also acquired a recruiting company called NCSA. So now there's all these products connected in performance and in youth sports. What's the result of that? I mean, we never expected this to happen, but we sold IMG Academy to private equity from Endeavor about 8 months ago, and we're pinching ourselves because we put so much into this thing. It was such a validation of all the work that we had done. Our new ownership, EQT Private Equity, came in and purchased it for $1.25 billion. And what I could say about the future is we're putting our foot on the gas and accelerating growth. Like we feel there's so much more that can be done in sports and performance and sports education. And people ask me who our peers are. And I say, not to sound arrogant, but we're kind of one of one. We won't be one of one forever, but we're one of one. And the brand, like you said early on, is the thing that really is winning the day. I feel really lucky to be leading this thing. You know, it is about as unique a property as you're going to find. Having said that, it's a lift, 1,200 employees, thousands of kids, like kids are boarding there. Like, as you can imagine, people think it's this utopia. Like, it's a high school. We deal with typical high school stuff there like you do anywhere else.
There are two kinds of entrepreneurs, those who run their businesses and those whose businesses run them. If you've lost control of your business, consider running on EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. EOS is used by more than 190,000 companies worldwide to help simplify, clarify, and achieve their vision. My friend and colleague, Brandon Blell, is a professional EOS implementer. She can help. Schedule a meeting with her at eosworldwide.com/Brandon-Blell. That's BLELL, or connect with her on LinkedIn. If you are looking for a commercial roofer, you got to call Catamount Roofing first. They are experts in the commercial roofing space, serving North and South Carolina. The team at Catamount specialize in commercial, industrial, medical, and institutional roofing. They will care for your roofing investment every step of the way, from design and installation to maintenance throughout its life to ensure maximized watertight service. Solutions through perseverance. Catamount Roofing. They work to make your roof last longer. Get in touch today at catamountroofing.us. That's catamountroofing.us.
Tim, I could go on and on. I just think there's so many leadership nuggets here. You know, if you didn't go through what you went through at Rutgers, you wouldn't be at IMG in this situation. And you know, I see a piece about you. I see, I talk about when confidence plus humility equals class, and there's few people that have that. And I see that in you. You have a confidence, yet a humility. And who knows, maybe if you were still at Rutgers, you wouldn't have that humility. You know, and I think about that at North Carolina. If I was National Coach of the Year, my first year, you know, maybe I wouldn't have had that humility. Maybe I'd be divorced. Maybe so when I get to heaven, I'm going to ask God, like, yo, God, 2003, you hit me over the head. You know, why? I think I know why, but you're better off. You're a better man today, having gone through what you went through at Rutgers. I believe that, but, you know, do you believe that?
I do. You know, and at the moment, you don't think that at all. You just hate the world. Like, you feel like it's you against everybody. But once you're out of the chaos of it, you do realize that. And for me, like you said this before, you're like, well, maybe things gone different. Like you kept your foot on the gas, you'd still be there. I'm not sure that's where I wanted to be. Like at the time I did, but as I look at the trajectory and what's happened since, I've been really lucky, to have to go through something like that, but able to learn from it and also think about how it applies to other situations. Like I reflect on that all the time. I deal with crisis and tough situations on pretty much a daily basis in my current role. I think I'm battle tested now based on how that happened. And, and that's a great thing to have. And like what you said is true. And I think most people in the space want to deny this. It's not possible not to get caught up in the ego and the persona of who you become when you're in a public job like that. It's not possible not to feed on that a little bit, but to feed on it long term is unhealthy. And sometimes when things like this happen, which we probably would rewrite, if we could rewrite it, you wouldn't have it end the way it did, right? Like it would end, but maybe not like in a public spectacle, but maybe that was what God had intended, right? In order to shape who you are as an individual. So for me, like, believe me, Matt, I wouldn't sign up to go through it again. All right. I just make it 100% clear. Having said that, the sun came up and the opportunities I've had and the relationships I've developed and things I've been able to do since then are not things that I ever expected I would be able to do in my life.
Tim, a lot of people see the coach, the player, the AD out front, but they don't really see and witness and feel what the spouse is going through. What is your wife's name, first and foremost? And let's bring her out front of this. And how did she feel as you went through this? Because she's a Rutgers alum and living in New Jersey, and her most important people in her life, let's be real here, is not the husband, it's the kids. So she wants to protect the kids. And how did that all unfold for you and with your wife?
It was impossible not for everyone, in the household to feel some impact on it. Danielle was hurt the way I was hurt, I think, by the entire experience. And as far as the kids go, they all reacted different. Like our daughter she was little at the time, like she was only 5 years old. My older son, Connor, definitely was old enough to understand what was happening. And he was very, frustrated and upset. And then my son, Max, at times was seen out shooting hoops in the driveway, talking to some of the press. So, they all kind of handled it differently. But, how did Danielle handle it? Like she does everything else. She protects the kids. And I think she felt hurt for me and for us. And as far as like how she handled it, she got out in front of it. There was press out in front of my street. She was coming and going, taking kids to school. There's a famous clip of her on YouTube walking to the end of the driveway to talk to Bruce Beck, who was in the media at WNBC, but also a friend, to let him know that like he was waiting for nothing because I wasn't in the house. And then she fired at the cameras and said what she thought. And
go ahead, Danielle.
She said something. She sort of like headed back and then swung her head around and said, Tim Pernetti's the best athletic director they're ever going to have. And that was all she said. But that's all she needed to say at the time. And I think it kind of was illustrative of how we all felt at the time, which was, hurt, betrayed, frustrated, all that stuff. But we got through it, and honestly, she felt early on when I was being interviewed for that job that it wasn't a great fit for me. And she used to say that. She's like, I know this is Rutgers. I know. She's like, I just don't know about this. And as it turned out, it was a prophecy. Like she was right, because at times we wondered in a tough situation how things would play out. Mm-hmm. But, we've been together, we got married when we were young. We've been together, going on 28 years now. She's just an incredible person. Yeah. Period. Because I've run around my whole life, Matt, on planes and traveling and being at big events. And a lot of times when the kids were younger, like I did that stuff on my own and wasn't even able to involve her in some of it. But as we've gotten older, I have, and it's been, more fun to do. But one thing I know about her is like, she has my back 1,000%. She always has. And that is part of, one of 1,000 things about her that is great.
Yeah.
That's I appreciate that. That's awesome. And I think we need to recognize our spouses because I could say the same about my wife, Kelly. Tim, two things. What do you want to be remembered for? What do you want? And I know you're a humble guy, so you probably, I don't care, but we all do care. And like, what do you want people to say about you? What do you want to be remembered for when your time is gone?
That's a great question. I don't think I've ever been asked that. There's a couple of things, but one of them I actually just said, I feel lucky to have been in leadership in a lot of different things. And the thing I'm doing now is a real people intensive leadership role. And in leadership, like, people need to know that you care about them, and it can't be fake. Like, you can't pretend to be someone that cares. You have to care. And what does that mean? Like, you have to involve yourself in their lives. You have to ask questions. You have to ask where they want to get in their career and actually help them, even if that includes them leaving your current organization. But what I think I want to be remembered for the most, and I think if you asked people in any of the roles I've had to say one thing, they would say, that guy had my back.
Wow.
He had my back. I know he had my back. He held me accountable, but he had my back. And in leadership, a lot of leaders will sidestep the difficult situations. And if they say they know you have their back, it's because you take the punch. Mm-hmm. Things are not always going to go right. Good leadership takes the punch so everybody else can move forward. That's definitely one. And the other one is just that I wore it on my sleeve. Like, I've never been in a role where I wasn't openly and outwardly passionate and emotional about it. And I think a lot of leadership is reserved and you can't show emotion because you're in charge. I actually think showing emotion is a great trait of leadership because it shows how much you care, which inspires other people to care and get in the boat with you. Mm-hmm. And this, like when you and I first met and I gave you your first TV job, I remember telling you about this little network that not a lot of people were watching, but we were so passionate about what it could be. And I think I hooked you too.
Yes, of course.
Right? Because you have to create buy-in. Otherwise, people are going to see it as a job and not an opportunity.
Well, I think that I always say this, the three main focuses of areas to focus on as a leader are: one, you got to cast a vision; two, you got to drive the culture; and three, you engage in large business transactions. And you just talked about casting a vision because that excites people. And energy is probably the most valuable resource that you can cultivate in an organization, because without energy, you're not going to move forward at a rate, and you're not going to overcome obstacles. With the book, Jack Welch, Straight from the Gut, talks about the four things he looks for in a lead in his employees are the 4 E's: energy, energize, execute with an edge. Do you bring energy to the workplace? Can you energize others? Can you execute? Close. Can you close a sale? And then can you do it with an edge? Because sometimes you have to throw an elbow, like you did with Syracuse football when they claimed to be, New York's football program, but yet they weren't in the same TV markets that you were at Rutgers. Lastly.
That's all accurate, Matt. And you know what? I tend to oversimplify, right? Because I'm from New Jersey and I went to a state school, so I'm not that smart. But what I always say, like I say this to my own kids and I say it to every employee we hire in any job I'm in, I say, you've been given an opportunity and now you have a choice. Are you going to do the minimum or are you going to do the maximum? Because if you do the maximum, which includes doing things outside what your job says you should do, you'll be great. And by the way, that group of people is this big. This group of people is that big.
That's right. Lastly, what question should I have asked that I didn't?
I mean, I'm surprised that, as a middle child, that you didn't ask how much trouble I got in growing up, and what the consequences were of that, because, Tim, you know me better than a lot of people.
I got one question for you. What was it like as a middle child? How much trouble did you get into, and what was that like?
I'm surprised my mother still talks to me. That's all I'll say. Okay. Because it was pretty much a daily occurrence. But again, you talk about opportunities. The benefit of being in trouble all the time, which I was growing up, was you were made to sit in the kitchen so your mom could keep an eye on you. And you were also within arm's range of a wooden spoon getting cracked. But the silver lining was I learned how to cook. I got screamed and yelled at in the kitchen, but I learned how to make the meatballs and I learned how to make Sunday dinner. And what's ironic is like cooking is one of the things I actually love to do more than anything. Sometimes I'll see a wooden spoon and I'll have like a little traumatic moment. But, otherwise, like I said, I'm surprised my mother still talks to me given the stuff I put her through as a middle child.
I always love being with you. You have that emotion, that energy that's attractive. Thank you for being on this show. I'm grateful to call you a friend.
You're the best, man. I think back to when we first met and how it all started, but the fact that 20 years later we're still doing this really, it says a lot about the relationship. So thanks for the opportunity.
Amen, brother.
Leadership is a learned behavior. You're a leader, whether you're a parent, a coach, a business owner, or a friend. We all lead in some way, shape, or form. Thanks for listening. I welcome any and all feedback. You can reach me at dohertycoaching.com.
At Action Plus Ideas, your brand is our purpose. Elevating brands through premium merchandise and apparel is our expertise. With a legacy spanning over 30 years in Charlotte, we take pride in serving our community and beyond. With exceptional service, top-tier products, and always on-time delivery, we create lasting client relationships. As a prominent promotional products distributor, we offer competitive pricing, superior decoration, and inventive marketing solutions to make your brand stand out from the crowd. Contact Action Plus Ideas for more information at actionplusideas.com.